Glaber's wife, who is 6 months pregnant, has been kidnapped. Yet, he is not only unalarmed but even takes this opportunity to roll in the sheets with another woman. During this tumultuous affair, Lucius suddenly arrives at the mansion to deliver a message for Spartacus. Before sunrise the next morning, Glaber prepares a carriage filled with armor and weapons. He can only take 3 followers to the meeting place. To show sincerity, Spartacus also brings only 3 people. As long as Spartacus gets the armor and weapons, Ilithia will naturally return unharmed and safe. This not too harsh condition, one would believe, is something anyone would fight to the death to protect their spouse and child. But after seeing Glaber's next move, you will surely be shocked by his heartless and insane actions. As dawn barely breaks, Glaber arrives at the agreed delivery spot as promised. Following Spartacus's request, he indeed only brought 3 guards and a carriage. Presumably, the carriage was filled with armor and weapons. Soon, Spartacus also appears with 3 people: Crixus, Gannicus, and Agrin. After many days, these sworn enemies finally meet. Spartacus hands a piece of cloth to Glaber, taken from Ilithia's dress. Just like what Glaber had done before, Spartacus also wants Glaber to experience the same despair and helplessness he once felt. However, Spartacus forgets that their nature is fundamentally different. For Spartacus, his wife is someone he would sacrifice his life to protect. But for Glaber, his wife is just a tool to achieve his goals. If it could lead to the death of Spartacus, then sacrificing his unborn child is deemed worthwhile.
You're not like me. Your wife was the heart that beats within your breast. You would have given all to see her live. Well, I will do the same. To see you dead.
Unexpectedly, the carriage, supposedly filled with weapons, turns out to be full of soldiers. Led by Ashur, they jump from the carriage and launch a frenzied attack on Spartacus's men. Fortunately, being battle-hardened, they manage to hold off for a while, but they are quickly overpowered due to the enemy's numerical advantage. At this critical moment of life and death, Spartacus immediately signals Mira, who is hiding in ambush. It must be said that a woman's sixth sense is quite reliable. Mira never trusted Glaber to keep his promise. At her insistence, Spartacus had arranged for her to be the backup. With the cover of arrows from Mira and Lucius, Spartacus and his men gradually gained the upper hand. But at that moment, Salvius suddenly blows a horn. A large group of soldiers suddenly emerge nearby. Seeing the situation turning dire, Spartacus immediately orders everyone to retreat. To cover their escape, Lucius volunteers to stay behind and hold off the enemy.
Lucius! Go! Before I come to fucking sense.
The Egyptian that Ashur found is indeed terrifyingly strong. Arrows shot at him seem just like tickles. He walks straight up to Lucius and with 2 strikes, ends his life. Back at the mansion, Glaber is still brooding over not having killed Spartacus, completely forgetting that his wife is still in the enemy's hands. Lucretia was speechless at the sight of this heartless man. To kill Spartacus, this demon is willing to sacrifice the entire world, making life unbearable for everyone. So, Lucretia finds Glaber's new love, Sepia, and reveals to her the true cause of her brother's death.
It's your brother's, is it not?
How did you come by this?
Hidden amongst Ash's treasures, stripped from the bodies of those who have died at his hand.
Asher?
You must have been there that night, when your brother fell. Yet the villain moves only upon command of Gaius, Claudius, Glaber.
It turns out that just this morning, Ashur was about to rape Lucretia again, but accidentally knocked over the treasure chest in his room. Lucretia struggles but to no avail. At that moment, Lucretia suddenly sees a bracelet rolling out nearby, the very one taken from Seppius. Upon learning the truth about her brother's death, Sepia is completely devastated, realizing the man she loved is a monster in human skin. Thus, a plan for revenge begins to quietly take root in Sepia's heart. Meanwhile, Spartacus and his people have safely returned to their camp. Unexpectedly, Spartacus has no intention of killing Ilithia. He tells Ilithia about what happened during the exchange of weapons, and then Spartacus says some meaningful words before leaving.
Taking it will balance nothing. It does not move you.
I love my wife.
After months of being kidnapped, Ilithia finally escaped, but when she returned home, she saw her husband in the arms of another woman. Exhausted, Ilithia can barely take a few steps before fainting into a pool. Eventually, Ilithia wakes up from her coma. To her astonishment, the first thing her husband asks is not about her or the child in her womb but about Spartacus's hideout. Ilithia says she was blindfolded all the way and recalls little. She vaguely remembers Greek letters carved on the old pillars in the room. Obviously, this information is not very helpful in capturing Spartacus. Seeing that his wife provided no further useful information, Glaber, now devoid of any affection for her, leaves without looking back. Fortunately, someone truly cares for her. Seeing Ilithia return safely, Lucretia is almost moved to tears. Now, like grasshoppers tied to the same string, they must work together to escape the control of Glaber and Ashur. After exchanging greetings, they start sharing information. Ilithia tells Lucretia that the child she is carrying is Spartacus's, and Lucretia reveals to Ilithia that it was Glaber who actually killed Seppia's brother.
Yet she stays within this house. Body offered to the man who wounded her.
To leave now would only serve to arouse suspicion.
I would see such embers given breath. My child and I to rise from the ashes of ill-fated past.
Meanwhile, Glaber is gathering with Ashur to analyze Spartacus's hiding place, but the area is too vast. They simply cannot pinpoint the exact location. At that moment, Ashur's Egyptian subordinate brings Lucius's head. They lock down the approximate area based on Lucius's previous activities, and conclude that Spartacus's stronghold must be in a Greek temple at the foot of Vesuvius. This time Ashur has indeed made a significant contribution, and Glaber immediately promises a substantial reward after capturing Spartacus. Ashur took this opportunity to ask for his freedom, and asked Glaber to give him Batiatus training ground and Lucretia as well. Glaber agrees without hesitation. Then, Ashur triumphantly tells Lucretia the news. Lucretia was furious. The training ground was the work of generations of Batiatus' family. How could Ashur get it so cheaply? So, the idea of getting rid of this beast becomes even stronger in Lucretia's mind. At this moment, Glaber is assembling his army, preparing to strike Spartacus and his group in one fell swoop under the cover of night. But the arrival of a man completely disrupts his plans. This man is Seppius's cousin, Varinius. It turns out that the Senate has lost confidence in Glaber due to his recent failures and has sent Varinius to replace him, ordering Glaber to return to Rome the next morning. Glaber, of course, will not let Varinius take the credit, and he immediately brings up the law and accuses the Senate of being out of order. Varinius immediately retorts that a man who can have his wife abducted has no right to lead an army into battle. At this moment, Ilithia emerges from the room.
I have been taken only to bed, my child causing unexpected discomfort in waning months of pregnancy.
Did it also cause the bruise upon your cheek?
No, it did not. The fault was mine. A misplaced step as I was coming from the bath.
Varinius did not want to argue with them. He warned Glaber not to disobey the order and that he would come tomorrow to take over officially. After saying this, Varinius prepares to leave. As Varinius exits, he encounters Seppia. It turns out Seppia wrote to Varinius about the happenings here, but she didn't expect Spartacus to release Ilithia, and the cause of Seppius's death, based only on a bracelet, cannot be used to identify Glaber as the murderer. Varinius feels humiliated. He harshly scolds Seppia and leaves, plunging her into deep despair. At night Seppia went to Lucretia and cried. She laments that the beast Glaber slaughtered her brother's entire family, yet she must share a bed with him every day. A torturous ordeal. So, Lucretia suggests a plan. When she is intimate with Glaber, he will surely let his guard down, and then she can seize the opportunity to kill him and avenge her brother. The naive Seppia believes Lucretia's words, but what she doesn't know is that this is actually a plot by Lucretia and Ilithia.
She has moved towards deed.
I believe it so. Are you certain this is what you desire?
If Gaius is not moved by pleading word, then I will have blood and death. And in the bringing of it, my life returned to me.
Not long after, Seppia finds Glaber in the bathhouse. Glaber is troubled about being recalled to Rome. Just as he's about to walk in on Seppia and try to make something happen, Seppia grabs a jar of wine off the table and smashes it into Glaber's head.
Your fucking hands from my brother from this world!
In the nick of time, Ilithia grabbed the dagger from behind and stabbed Sepia to death. The hot blood finally awakens Glaber. He couldn't understand why Ilithia saved his life after the way he treated her. Perhaps after experiencing the kidnapping and the change in her marriage, Ilithia has awakened, realizing that her only reliance now is her husband. Even though their feelings can never return to what they once were, they can join hands against their common enemy.
You would move against Veronius.
We are both monsters, Gaius. Let us be so together and seize the bucking heavens.
This is the grandest battle in the second season of Spartacus, but before this war begins, what preparations did Spartacus's rebels make? Currently, they have fewer than 50 gladiators fit for battle. To expand their forces, Spartacus and Agron lead a raid on the port of Naples and successfully rescue dozens of slaves with considerable fighting skills. These slaves, being captives from the battlefield, are naturally enemies of the Romans. With their addition, the strength of the rebel army greatly increases. However, internal conflicts also become increasingly pronounced. The new arrivals were all Agron's countrymen, and they looked up to him. The original rebel army was composed mostly of Gauls, who generally only follow Crixus's command. Due to the mutual disdain between Crixus and Agron, the army naturally splits into two factions. They often quarrel over trivial matters. Fortunately, Spartacus manages to keep them under control, but he knows that without unity, defeating the Romans is impossible. Thus, Spartacus decides to do something to unite the team. He arranges for Agron to rob a carriage, obtaining a lot of wine and food, planning to hold a banquet with these supplies. Everyone starts to eat and drink merrily. After the wine, Spartacus proposes a special fighting competition. He suggests that those who dislike each other the most fight side by side against their opponents. This move indeed works wonders, and everyone is immediately immersed in a joyful and pleasant atmosphere.
Drink and contest. A clever strategy to forge necessary bonds.
I don't see more follow.
Let us have new contest. Agron. Crixus. Gannicus. Animaeus. Stand against them.
Come. Do what is necessary.
Begin!
The clash, fiery as a meteor colliding with the earth, ends with the victory of Enamaus and Gannicus. Of course, that's not the most important thing. The important thing is that after this special cooperation, they put aside their grudges and finally reconciled. Spartacus is extremely relieved. Now, it's time to seriously prepare for the real challenge. Unexpectedly, the Roman army arrives so quickly. That very night, Spartacus sees the alarm being raised at the mountain watchposts and immediately organizes his men for emergency deployment.
A coward's position. He will advance his troops in tight formation, intending to overpower. It is the Roman way. We will teach them ours.
The Roman army is steadily advancing towards the temple. Crixus leads his men to suddenly emerge from the forest and launch a frenzied attack on the unsuspecting enemy, but they do not advance recklessly. Seeing the enemy forces continuously arriving, Crixus immediately orders a retreat back to the temple. The Roman army pursues relentlessly. However, when they rush into the temple, they find it completely empty. But in the next second, the countless archers hidden around the houses began to shoot, killing them all instantly. Meanwhile, taking advantage of the enemy's forces rushing into the temple, Spartacus and Gannicus penetrate the enemy's rear and successfully capture their leading general. Shockingly, this man is not Glaber but Verinius, who is eager to take credit. Spartacus brings Verinius back to the temple. By this time, The enemy forces have been almost completely slaughtered. Just as Spartacus is interrogating Verinius about Glaber's whereabouts, suddenly several fireballs tear through the sky and head straight for the temple. Verinius doesn't even realize what's happening before he is burned beyond recognition on the spot. Spartacus finally realizes that the cunning and sly Glaber must have already arrived with his army. His guess is correct. Glaber and his army of a few hundred are ready and waiting. Due to the suddenness of the attack and the enemy's fierce firepower, Spartacus's men fall into chaos, with many dying tragically. Spartacus himself is blown away by a fireball and falls unconscious. As a breach is made in the wall, Roman soldiers swarm in, and a chaotic battle ensues. After a brief loss of consciousness, Spartacus finally wakes up. Knowing the overwhelming disparity in strength, Spartacus immediately orders a retreat through the underground tunnels, but during the retreat, Enimaus's eye is unfortunately injured by an Egyptian. Fortunately, Gannicus successfully rescues Enimaus. Spartacus smashes oil barrels to create a firewall, finally buying a brief respite for their escape. However, the remnants of his group barely emerge from the other end of the tunnel before finding themselves completely surrounded by enemy troops. With no possibility of breaking through, their only option is a narrow path leading to Vesuvius. Spartacus has no choice but to lead his people up the mountain. Though they have the high ground, which is easy to defend but hard to attack, the mountain is desolate and freezing cold. Surviving even one night there would be a miracle. Glaber, of course, understands this. Without food and water, Spartacus and his men cannot last long. He only needs to guard the only path down the mountain to starve them to death.
And when hunger and madness drive them from their perch, we shall kill them all.